Once upon a time, stories taught us that princes rescue princesses, that heroes wear crowns, and that destiny follows a path already written. But what happens when someone refuses to accept the role assigned to them? What happens when a young girl dares to step beyond the boundaries of fairy tale itself? Our world is filled with invisible cages. Some are built from fear, others from expectations, and many are disguised as dreams we have been taught to chase. From childhood, we inherited stories about who we should be, how we should live, and what kind of future awaits us. Yet somewhere deep within the human heart exists a longing to break beyond those boundaries, to reach towards the horizon that belongs to no one but ourselves. It is the longing for freedom, for authenticity, for a life defined not by fate, but by choice. Beneath the roses, castles, and dreams lies a story about freedom, about the courage to question the world, to challenge the expectations that shape our lives, and to seek a truth that exists beyond illusion. At the heart of that story, like a rose reaching toward the sunlight through cracks in stone, lies Utena Tenjou, a symbol of courage and what it takes to challenge the roles we are given and search for the person we were always meant to become. Utena's story begins with loss. As a child, she loses her parents and is left emotionally devastated. In this moment of despair, she encounters a mysterious prince who comforts her and gives her a Rose Signet Ring. More importantly, he gives her hope. For Utena, the prince becomes more than a person. He becomes an ideal. He represents strength, kindness, protection, and nobility. This encounter creates a psychological blueprint that shapes her entire identity. Instead of dreaming about being rescued, Utena decides she wants to become the rescuer herself. This is the first revolutionary act of the series. Traditional fairy tale teaches girls to wait for the prince. Utena decides to become one. However, there is a tragedy hidden within this choice. Children often respond to trauma by constructing idealized identities that protect them from pain. Utena's prince persona functions as a defense mechanism against helplessness. By becoming a prince, she never has to deal with vulnerability again. Her strength is genuine, but it is also armor. Unlike many protagonists who seek power, recognition, or personal gain, Utena is driven by sincere desire to protect others and do what she believes is right. She views the world through the lens of compassion and believes that people deserve kindness, dignity, and understanding. Yet the world she inhabits constantly challenges these beliefs. Time and time again, she encounters manipulation, selfishness, and cruelty, forcing her to confront the painful gap between the world as it is and the world she wishes it could be. Psychologically, Utena represents the struggle of maintaining one's ideals in the face of disappointment. Many people respond to betrayal or hardship by becoming cynical, convincing themselves that goodness is naive and that kindness is a weakness. Utena, however, refuses to surrender to that cynicism. She continues to believe in the value of compassion even when it brings her pain. Her idealism is not born from ignorance of the world's darkness, but from a conscious choice to reject it. In this sense, her character demonstrates that true strength is not the ability to abandon one's principles when reality becomes difficult, but the courage to hold on to them despite everything that tries to break them. On a deeper psychological level, Utena's idealism can also be understood as a response to loss and vulnerability. As a child, she experienced profound grief, and the image of the prince became a symbol of hope during one of the darkest moments of her life. By striving to embody the ideals represented by that figure, courage, nobility, and selflessness, she creates a sense of meaning in a world that once seemed cruel and unpredictable. Her idealism therefore functions as both a moral compass and a coping mechanism. It allows her to believe that suffering can be overcome and that people are capable of becoming something better than their circumstances. Throughout the series, this belief is repeatedly tested, but it never completely disappears. Utena's journey suggests that idealism is not the absence of pain or disillusionment. Rather, it is a decision to continue believing in the possibility of goodness even after one's illusions have been shattered. That choice, more than any duel or act of bravery, is what makes her truly revolutionary. Utena Tenjou is often considered one of the most important feminist characters in anime, but not simply because she wears a boy's uniform or fights with a sword. Her feminism runs much deeper than appearances. Utena challenges the very foundations of traditional gender expectations that ask a radical question. Why should courage, leadership, and heroism belong exclusively to men? In a world shaped by fairy tales where girls are expected to be princesses waiting for their rescue, Utena refuses to accept that role. Instead, she chooses to become the prince. This choice is not a rejection of womanhood, but a rejection of the limitations society places upon it. What makes her such a compelling feminist character is that she refuses to define herself through other people's expectations. Throughout history, women have been often encouraged to be passive, obedient, and depend on others for protection and validation. Utena stands in direct opposition to these expectations. She is outspoken, athletic, independent, and fiercely protective of those she cares about. Yet the series never represents these traits as masculine qualities. Instead, it questions why these qualities are ever considered masculine in the first place. Utena's existence challenges the idea that strength and femininity are opposites. At the same time, this story doesn't simply replace one stereotype with another. Many stories celebrate strong female characters by giving them traditionally masculine traits, while dismissing qualities associated with femininity. Utena avoids this trap. Beneath her confidence and bravery, she remains deeply compassionate, emotionally vulnerable, and capable of profound empathy. The series suggests that true strength is not found in becoming more masculine, but in embracing one's full humanity. Utena's power comes not from rejecting emotion, but from allowing herself to care deeply about others despite the pain that caring often brings. The series also explores how patriarchal systems affect women in different ways through Utena's relationship with Anthy. While Utena rebels openly against society's expectations, Anthy represents what happens when someone is trapped within those expectations for so long that they begin to internalize them. Anthy is treated as an object rather than a person, a prize to be won and possessed by others. Through the relationship, the series examines how women can be reduced to symbols, fantasies, and roles rather than being recognized as individuals. Utena's determination to see Anthy as a human being rather than a possession becomes one of the story's most powerful feminist statements. However, the brilliance of Utena's character lies in the fact that the series eventually critiques her as well. Utena initially believes she can save Anthy by becoming the perfect prince. She sees herself as a hero and Anthy as a person who needs rescuing. Yet the story gradually reveals the limitations of this perspective. Even the role of the prince can become a form of power over others. In this way, the series challenges not only traditional gender roles, but also the idea that liberation can be achieved through a simple reversal of these roles. True freedom cannot come from replacing one hierarchy with another. It requires dismantling the entire system that divides people into rescuers and rescues, princes and princesses, subjects and objects. This is what makes Utena's feminism remarkably sophisticated. This series is not merely arguing that women can be heroes. It is questioning why society needs rigid categories of hero and heroine in the first place. Utena begins the story wanting to become a prince because she associates princes with freedom, power, and agency. By the end of her journey, the deeper lesson emerges. She does not need to become a prince to possess those qualities. Courage, compassion, leadership, and self-determination are not masculine traits. They are human traits. In many ways, Utena represents a vision of feminism that seeks liberation not only for women, but for everyone trapped by restrictive social expectations. The series recognizes that gender roles can become prisons. limiting how people see themselves and what they believe they are allowed to become. Utena's rebellion is therefore larger than a fight against sexism. It is a rebellion against every system that tells people who they must be. Her journey is ultimately about claiming the freedom to define oneself beyond the labels imposed by society. Even decades after the series first aired, Utena remains a powerful feminist icon because her struggle feels timeless. She is not simply fighting to prove that women can be strong. She is fighting for a world where strength, vulnerability, compassion, and freedom belong to everyone. Her revolution is not about becoming a different kind of woman or a different kind of hero. It is about creating a world where people no longer have to fit into predetermined roles at all. This is what makes her character so enduringly powerful, and why her story continues to resonate with audiences around the world. In fairy tales, a single object can change the course of a life. A ring may hold a promise, a sword may represent a destiny, and a rose may conceal both beauty and pain. Revolutionary Girl Utena embraces this tradition, filling its world with symbols that speak not only to the story itself, but to the deepest struggles of the human heart. Beneath their elegant appearances lies a profound reflection on courage, identity, and the journey towards becoming oneself. The Rose Signet Ring is one of the most important symbols in the story. Its main function is to identify those who can participate in the duels and enter the mysterious world surrounding the Rose Bride. However, its meaning goes far beyond that. Symbolically, the ring represents promises, ideals, and the dreams that guide a person's life. For Utena, it serves as a reminder of the hope and inspiration she received in childhood, reflecting her desire to pursue something noble and meaningful. Throughout much of the series, Utena fights using the Sword of Dios, a blade drawn from Anthy's body. On the surface, it appears to be the sword of the legendary prince she admired as a child. Symbolically, it represents an external source of power, the ideal of heroism that Utena has spent her life trying to imitate. The Sword of Dios embodies courage, justice, sacrifice, and nobility. It is everything Utena believes a prince should be. However, because the sword belongs to Dios, it also represents a form of borrowed identity. Utena's strength initially comes from trying to become someone else. She is not yet acting entirely from her own sense of self. She is acting according to an ideal she inherited. This reflects a common stage in psychological development. Before discovering who we truly are, we often model ourselves after heroes, mentors, or ideals. We imitate virtues that inspire us. There is nothing wrong with this. It is often necessary, but eventually, imitation reaches its limits. One of the most profound moments in the series occurs when Utena manifests her own sword. Unlike the Sword of Dios, this blade does not originate from a prince, a fairy tale, or an inherited ideal. It comes from Utena herself. This is the moment when her journey reaches its true culmination. By pulling a blade entirely independent of Dios, Utena dismantles the illusion of the damsel in distress. She is no longer just playing the role of the prince. She becomes a hero acting on her own authentic feelings of love and justice. Psychologically, this moment represents individuation, the process of becoming one's authentic self. Utena finally moves beyond imitation and into self-definition. She stops asking, "How can I become a prince?" and instead begins living according to her own values. The significance of this cannot be overstated. Throughout the series, the characters seek power through systems, titles, roles, and myths. Utena's sword reveals that true strength does not come from any of these things. It comes from the courage to act from one's own consciousness. Taken together, these three symbols form an entire arc of Utena's character. The Rose Signet Ring represents the dream and hope inherited from the past. The Sword of Dios represents the ideal she tries to become in borrowed heroism. And finally, Utena's own sword represents the self she ultimately discovers. The core tragedy of Revolutionary Girl Utena centers on the shattering of childhood illusions. Utena Tenjou's entire identity is built on a foundational myth, that a noble prince saved her from despair as a child, gave her a rose signet ring, and inspired her to become a prince herself to protect the world's innocence. When she discovers that Akio Otori, the acting chairman of Otori Academy, is that same very prince, it isn't a triumphant reunion. It is psychological horror. Akio reveals his true identity and stands before her not as a savior, but as the end of the world. Akio demands Utena to hand over her sword and stop playing the role of a prince, claiming that he will be hers. He does this not in the name of love or to save Anthy. He selfishly does this to break open the sword of Dios and to reclaim his lost power. This is the moment where Utena's ultimate tragedy peaks. She realizes that her noble idol is just a pathetic, aging man trapping everyone in an endless cycle of abuse so he can feel powerful again. Utena, though her heart still shaken, refuses to let Anthy be sacrificed further, which led Akio to cast off his mask completely. He draws a sword against the very girl he inspired, proving that the fairy tale was a trap from the very beginning. While devastating, Utena finding out the truth is the only way she can achieve true revolution. Her admiration for the prince was a form of captivity. It kept her trapped in a childish narrative defined by a man. By seeing Akio for the fallen, manipulative creature he is, Utena is forced to abandon the myth of the savior. She doesn't save the world, and she doesn't defeat Akio in battle. Instead, she chooses to suffer alongside Anthy, breaking the psychological hold Akio has over the Rose Bride. Utena's tragedy ends not in a fairy tale victory, but in a messy, painful, yet genuine liberating awakening. But patriarchy and cycle of trauma do not break just because someone is brave. Anthy, bound by centuries of learned helplessness and her own toxic codependencies with her brother, approaches Utena from behind. With a blank, hollow expression, Anthy drives a sword straight through Utena's back. As Utena collapses in agony, Anthy whispers the cruelest truth of all. You could never be my prince because you are a girl. This is the emotional nadir of the story. Utena is physically punctured by the very person she sacrificed her life to protect, forced to realize that her purity and love were met with betrayal. Yet even after being injured, she refuses to abandon Anthy. She continues reaching for her, not because she wants power or victory, but because she genuinely wants to free her. Utena, mortally wounded, crawls across the shattered arena. She is no longer fighting Akio. She is no longer trying to be a grand, noble prince. She is just a terrified young girl crawling towards her friend. She reaches the massive, heavy stone doors of the coffin. With her bare, bleeding hands, she tries to pry the gate open. The stone shreds her fingers. The arena is collapsing, and Akio watches in pathetic bewilderment as this dying girl uses the last ounces of her life force for something completely pointless. As Utena pushes the heavy doors open, inside the dark coffin, she finds Anthy crying. Utena doesn't have a magical sword anymore. She can't stop the millions of swords piercing Anthy. All she can do is reach for her hand through the gap. Their fingers touch. For a single fleeting second, they hold hands. Utena smiles through the tears and blood, not because she won, but because she made sure Anthy wasn't alone in the dark. The crumbling of the falling castle leads to Himemia slipping away from Utena's helpless, bloody hands. In the end, I couldn't become your prince. Utena sobs as her voice breaking. Forgive me, Himemia, for pretending to be a prince. Physically, Utena fails. She does not achieve the miracle she set out to accomplish in the way she imagined. The fairy tale ending she dreamed of never arrives. However, on a deeper level, this apparent failure becomes her greatest victory. For the first time in her life, Anthy witnesses someone who truly loves her without trying to possess, control, or use her. Utena's willingness to sacrifice herself for Anthy's freedom breaks through the emotional prison that they held Anthy captive for so long. Whether Utena literally dies at the end of the series is intentionally left ambiguous, but symbolically, a part of her does die. The girl who entered Otori Academy believing in princes, fairy tales, and miraculous destinies cannot survive the truth she discovers. Her ideals are tested, her illusions are shattered, and the world she trusted reveals itself to be built upon suffering and deception. In this sense, the final duel becomes a kind of death, not simply of the body, but of the self that existed before. Yet this symbolic death is also the very thing the series calls revolution. Throughout the story, revolution is not a political uprising or a victorious battle. It is the painful act of breaking free from the stories, roles, and systems that define us. It is the moment when a person leaves behind the comfortable illusion of who they are and steps into the frightening uncertainty of freedom. Revolution requires sacrifice because something must be lost before something can be born. Utena's revolution occurs when she chooses Anthy over her own dreams. She no longer fights to become a prince, to win a miracle, or to fulfill the promise she made as a child. Instead, she acts out of pure compassion. In doing so, she transcends the very game she had been trapped inside. The system expects people to seek power, status, and control. Utena rejects all of it. She is willing to lose everything if it means helping another person find freedom. That is why her disappearance carries such emotional weight. The world seems to erase her, as though she had never been consumed by the revolution she created. Yet her absence is also proof that something has changed. Before Utena, Anthy could not imagine another life. After Utena, she finds the courage to leave the academy behind and walk into an unknown future. The impossible has become possible. In the end, Utena's revolution was never about changing the world through force. It was about changing a single heart. Her sacrifice breaks a cycle that seemed eternal, and in doing so, she achieves the miracle everyone else was searching for. If Utena dies, she dies as a person who gave everything for another's freedom. And if she lives, she does so beyond the boundaries of the old world. Either way, the revolution is the same. The moment one person reaches beyond fear, beyond illusion, and beyond themselves to open the door for someone else to be free. Perhaps that is why this series continues to resonate decades after its release. Beneath its surreal imagery, fairy tale symbolism, and mysterious duels, lies a story about something deeply human. The courage to become yourself in a world that constantly tells you who you should be. Utena begins her journey searching for a prince, believing that strength means becoming the hero of a fairy tale. But by the end, she discovers something far more profound. True nobility is not found in castles, crowns, or miracles. It is found in the simple, terrifying act of reaching out a hand to another person and saying, "You do not have to remain trapped here." Long after the roses have withered and the duels have ended, what remains is not the image of a prince standing triumphantly atop a castle. What remains is the memory of a girl who refused to look away from another person's suffering. A girl who challenged an entire world simply by choosing compassion over power, love over possession, and freedom over fear. And maybe that is what revolution truly means. Not changing the world overnight, but opening a single door, reaching through the darkness, and helping someone else step into the light. Even if you can't follow them there, even if no one remembers your name, and even if all that remains of you is the courage you left behind. Because some people do not change the world by ruling it. They change it by teaching others that they are free. And somewhere beyond the gates of Otori Academy, beyond the fairy tale, beyond the end of the story, Utena walks on. No longer a prince, no longer a princess, but simply herself, and for the first time, truly free. The saddest part is that the girl who spent her life trying to save others had no one there to save her. That loneliness was the final price, the silent cost paid by the one who opened the door so that someone else could finally walk through it. In the end, her courage was evolutionary, and her legend will forever be revolutionary.